It is a pleasure to welcome our special guest to the program, Ben Swann, the website benswann.com. He's a two-time Emmy Award-winning investigative reporter, won multiple awards for journalism work as a TV anchor and reporter for local TV stations. Of course, a few Edward R. Murrow Awards as a fellow broadcasting journalism graduate. This is important, folks. And he was the first person to directly ask President Obama about the kill list. The website, again, is benswann.com, where you can find out all about the upcoming Truth in Media Project launch live streaming event this Friday, July 26th, 7 p.m. Eastern. Check it out at benswann.com, where you can also donate to the Truth in Media Project via PayPal. Ben, it is a pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. And just a quick update. We made a decision today that we are actually going to allow that live stream on Friday night to be free. We have removed the ticket price on it and decided to just make it a free event because some people have contacted us and said, hey, listen, we love what you're doing and we want to be a part of it, but they just can't quite come up with that money. And we said, you know what, forget it. Let's just make it free and make it a great event, and people can go on and check it out. So it'll be a free event, and I want to encourage everyone to go to benswann.com and check it out.
That is way cool. That's awesome. Fantastic, Ben. Folks can check out your bio at your website, benswann.com. I don't want to waste any of your time, Ben. Folks should go check out about you if they don't already know who you are. I want to kind of start with, I guess, hopefully cover a bunch of stuff with you, but I'll pick up where you write in the bio. You're talking about covering the 2012 primaries, and you began to kind of confront the problems in the electoral process and the stranglehold of the two-party system and the suppression of the voters' choices by the mainstream media. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, when we started covering this, I really had no idea how kind of this stranglehold that was on the system, both on the Democratic side and the Republican side. And covering the primary last year, I think, was a huge eye-opening experience for me in terms of just trying to understand exactly how this process works, because it's a very convoluted process. But once you get into it and you start to realize how controlled the whole process is by party leaders, and then move from the primary into the general election, and you find out that really both parties together are working to really control who gets into debates and who gets onto ballots. And it's an unbelievable situation, and it's one that a lot of people I don't think are aware of. So we really kind of cut our chops in terms of this kind of coverage, doing those kinds of stories, and I think people were very surprised to see them airing on a Fox affiliate, and we've kind of grown from there.
That's great. I love it, and I found myself working for kind of a larger media outlet in Washington D.C., approaching the elections myself, and finding similarly in a position seeking some sort of alternative or independent a candidate that I could even throw my support for. Because it was pretty convinced that I was getting nothing but spin and propaganda from the main sources.
Yeah. Well, I think that once you start to dig into it just a little bit, you realize what's happening. I mean, there is a reason why the political parties work to control so much of what's in the media. And it's really an issue of power. It's an issue of influence. I've talked to a lot of people about the 2012 election and the general election. A lot of folks don't realize kind of the two-party hold there is on the Commission for Presidential Debates. The fact that if you're with what they call a minor party or an alternative party, like the Libertarian or Green Party, you can't get into those debates. And the reason you can't get in is because, as part of it, you have to poll a certain percentage, during the polls. But you can't get into the polls because the media won't put you in them unless you're in a major party. And so there's a lot of collusion between media and those who are in power right now. And we want to see that broken. You have to keep in mind, there has never been a time like what we see today, where we have this collision of information and technology and opportunity all at the same time. And so I have a great deal of excitement about what the future holds for alternative media. and what it means for just general information in general for the public.
Yeah, and it breeds like on your website, you say it kind of breeds almost like a cultural truth deficit, and the historical centers of truth have broken down, and ultimately your average U.S. citizens really lost their voice or their ability to speak up against that money and that power, and the disenfranchisement from the two-party system. And can you talk a little bit about like you as an investigative journalist in that whole structure, and kind of what led you to the shift in from to what you're doing now?
Sure. As an investigative journalist, when I started really covering a lot of these issues, I realized that it wasn't just politics that isn't being covered, but there are so many issues that just don't get correct coverage. So when we talk about what's happening with media, here's how I describe it to people. National media has done a very good job of shifting from things that are facts and making them sound like opinions, and then taking things that are opinions and making them sound like facts. And I think as a result of that, the majority of people really don't have a strong grasp on a lot of the stories of the day, because it becomes very confusing. So a good example of that is this whole issue with Edward Snowden and the NSA. There are a lot of opinions that have been infused into this discussion. Huge numbers of opinions like, who is Edward Snowden? Does he like America? And what is his girlfriend like? And where was he living? And how did he get access to all these hard drives? Was he someone who was a patriot? Or was he a contractor who didn't really care? Is Greenwald a journalist who hates America? And it becomes all these issues. Those are all opinion issues. Then they take the facts of the case, things like the fact that what the NSA had been doing and continues to do is illegal. The fact that under the Patriot Act and the FISA Acts, these are not authorized. The surveillance of Americans and the spying on their emails and their phone conversations and gathering the metadata is not allowed. And so what they've done is they've confused the two, and so folks have a very hard time following what's happening. So what we've tried to do is really investigate stories that other members of mainstream media will completely ignore, and go after those stories in a way that we feel will enlighten people, will wake them up, but we also don't want to be preaching to the choir. So a lot of our content is meant to bridge the gap between alternative media and mainstream media, and a lot of the folks who we connect with are people who see us as looking like and having the same kind of production quality and look of a mainstream media outlet, but talking about things that they won't talk about in the mainstream.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you bring up NSA and Glenn Greenwald, and I'd love to ask you as a investigative journalist yourself. I mean, your thoughts on the what was it, the scandal into the hacking of journalists' cell phones and information, and really the kind of the I guess what would be an attempt to kind of criminalize investigative journalism. Right.
Well, that's happening right now. The James Rosen case, where Rosen had his emails hacked, his work phone was tapped, as well as his parents' emails and their telephones, his private emails and his private phones. As we see that happening, and again, we have a president who says, well, look, people have to realize there has to be a balance between journalism and national security. No, there doesn't. A journalist's job is to shed light on what government is doing. It is not the job of a journalist to protect what the government is doing. It is to keep the government accountable and lawmakers accountable in the things that they're doing. What we have right now, though, is an unprecedented time in American history when it comes to the way that journalists are being persecuted. Having said that, it's journalists in America who have it easy, because this administration has severely gone after journalists in other countries, locking them up and actually imprisoning journalists, like in Yemen, who have revealed what this administration is doing with drone strikes. So in the United States, we have a lot of persecution, but it's not even close to what they're facing overseas.
Oh, absolutely. Agreed. Absolutely. And so, well, to that point, if I may, I'd like to play a short clip for you, Ben, and then ask you about, to that point, holding those accountable, or holding those in power accountable. This is just a short 20-second clip. One of the news programs I try to watch on a daily basis is Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. And I got to ask Amy a question about what you just said when she came to town. I'm in Portland, Oregon, by the way. She came to town maybe 6-7 months ago. And I went to the book signing event, bought her book, and got to ask her a question. And here's the question I asked her about journalism, about kind of the purpose and what should we be doing as journalists. And your advice for young independent activists and broadcasters and journalists, what should we be focusing on our effort?
Continue to be good journalists, to go to where the silence is. We are not a party to the parties. We're supposed to be holding those in power accountable. There's a reason why our profession, journalism, is the only one explicitly protected by the U.S. Constitution, because we're supposed to be the check and balance on power.
Amy, thank you so much. And that more or less is what you're saying, right, Ben?
That's exactly right. We are tasked with really having and holding those in power accountable. But unfortunately, we don't do that anymore. I mean, there's such a desire by journalists and broadcasters to have access and to not violate kind of this, excuse me, to not violate this groupthink mentality, that it really is a detriment to the profession. And so for the most part, the Fourth Estate, which was really, as Amy was saying there, was given kind of the authority and the power and the protection to hold those accountable. We have relinquished it. We've handed it over. We've given it up.
Right. Of course, I'm leading up to your now, I would call, famous interview with President Obama while you're still in Cincinnati. And quite frankly, you know, if I had the opportunity to interview President Obama, I would definitely try to grill him on something, on some sort of question. I just want to, you know, tip of the hat, man. God bless you for doing it. And at the time, being the first person to ask him about the kill list. And can you just tell us a little bit about that, Ben?
Sure. You know, the president came to Toledo, Ohio during the presidential election last year, and our station had put in requests to be able to get a one-on-one interview. When he came to Toledo, our number came up, and they said, okay, you get to go and talk to him. So I had the chance to go and interview him, and you get 5 minutes with the president to get your questions in. And the typical narrative, obviously, for a local TV station is to ask the usual questions, like about the economy of the state that you're in, maybe something about a local bridge that needs work or maintenance. It's what most reporters will do. But I wanted to take the opportunity not to pose a gotcha question. I was looking for no gotcha questions, but to ask a question that I thought was very important, and that was to get information about why this president believed that he had the power, and it still believes he has the power, to have a kill list that includes American citizens, which clearly violates constitutional rights. And it's a very important question because it's not about this president. And that's what so many people who have seen it, we're so partisan in our thinking, say, oh, you only asked him that because you don't like President Obama and you must be a Republican. And so, you know, you're doing that because you're a racist and because he's black. And it's like, what are you talking about? Listen, right. It has nothing to do with that. And people have asked me, well, if George Bush were in power, you probably wouldn't have done that. That's not true at all. If George W. Bush were president and I had the chance to interview him about the very same thing, I would grill him on the very same thing. It's not about person or party. We have to cut through that left-right paradigm and say it doesn't matter who the person is. The Constitution does not give them the authority or the right. And the Constitution explicitly prevents that from happening. It doesn't just, you know, have a gray area here. It explicitly prevents U.S. citizens from being killed or imprisoned without due process. And to hand that over, even in the case of someone where you say, well, this person's a terrorist and they're a dangerous person, like Anwar al-Awlaki, what you've essentially done is you forfeit your own right. You forfeit your children's rights. And that's what we've done at this point in our society.
For our listeners who are just joining us, we're speaking with Ben Swann, the investigative grassroots journalist, the website benswann.com, where this Friday, July 26th, a now free live streaming event, the Truth in Media Project. You should definitely go check it out, 7 p.m. Eastern. That's this Friday, July 26th, benswann.com. And if you're liking what Ben's saying here, throw him a few bucks via PayPal, the Truth in Media Project at benswann.com.